In that frozen silence of 30 degrees, something small and weak cried out, a muffled whimper beneath the snow. The soldier, Ethan Cole, 38 years old, a man whose eyes had seen too many winters of war, paused. His rifle hung heavy on his back, but it wasn't the weapon that kept him moving through the white emptiness. It was instinct. And instinct told him that something alive was calling out, fragile, on the edge of death. He knelt, his gloved hands digging into the snow. At first he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him, but then he felt it, a faint tremor, a tiny body struggling beneath the weight of ice and cold. He tore faster, his fingers numb, until a small bundle emerged. A puppy, barely breathing. Its fur was clumped with ice, its tiny ribs trembling as if each breath might be its last. Ethan's heart clenched. "God help us both," he whispered, pressing the small creature against his chest, tucking it into his coat to share what little warmth he had left. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Behind him, a shadow loomed, his partner, Rex, a battle-trained German shepherd, strong and unyielding, with thick, sable fur and amber eyes that glowed like embers in the storm. Rex tilted his head, ears perked, studying the whimpering bundle Ethan held. With a low chuff, Rex nudged the soldier's arm, as if to say, "This one is ours now." For a moment, Ethan saw something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. But hope was fragile. The snow hid dangers greater than frostbite. The region was haunted by militias, men desperate, armed, and merciless in their hunger. Ethan knew the sound of gunfire could cut through the storm at any moment. Yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, he could not leave the puppy behind. The storm thickened, and Ethan trudged forward, Rex at his side. His breath came in ragged bursts, every exhale crystallizing into the air. Each step sank into snow up to his knees, but still he pressed forward, guided only by instinct and the soft sound of the puppy breathing inside his coat. Then Rex stopped, his ears pinned forward, nose lifted. A growl rumbled low in his throat. Ethan froze. He had learned long ago to trust that growl. Rex had saved his life more times than he could count. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, his hand resting on the dog's thick fur. "What do you hear?" Rex pulled slightly on the lead, guiding Ethan toward a darker patch of trees rising against the storm. And then Ethan saw it, barely visible in the blizzard, the outline of something unnatural in the snow. A wooden post, and beyond it, the faint shape of a cabin, buried halfway in ice. It looked abandoned. But in war-torn lands, appearances were lies. Ethan's training told him to circle wide, to scout, to assume danger. But the weight of the puppy against his chest reminded him he had more than his own life to think about now. And he remembered something his mother had once told him before the war stole everything. Sometimes God hides salvation in the smallest of creatures. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, nodded to Rex, and moved forward. The cabin's door was half collapsed, snow piled high against it. Ethan pushed it open with his shoulder, and the hinges groaned. Inside, the air was still, frozen, yet there was a faint scent, smoke long faded but human. Rex padded inside, nose twitching, his golden eyes cutting through the dark. Ethan lit a match, the flame trembling. The light revealed broken furniture, frost-covered walls, and there, an old stove in the corner. It hadn't burned in days, maybe weeks, but it could burn again. He laid the puppy gently on his coat near the stove and began gathering scraps of wood from broken chairs. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the memory of another winter, another helpless life he hadn't been able to save. This time, he promised himself, it would be different. As sparks caught and a flame grew, the puppy stirred, letting out a faint whine. Rex settled beside it, his massive frame a wall of protection, his muzzle resting gently across the tiny body. Ethan watched, breath catching in his throat. The storm outside raged, but inside, a fragile warmth flickered to life. Ethan crouched by the fire, staring at the puppy's tiny rise and fall of breath. He thought of all the things the world had taken from him, all the ways he had been broken. And he thought of what Rex had just led him to, not just a puppy, but a reason to believe there was still something worth fighting for. Then came the sound, a crunch of footsteps outside. Deliberate. Close. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. Rex was already up, ears forward, teeth bared in a silent snarl. The soldier's hand went to his rifle. The miracle they had just found was about to be tested by the world that wanted to take it away. The footsteps came in sets of 2, then 3, uneven cadence, as if one man favored a bad knee and the other was learning how to move in snow without leaving too much of himself behind. Ethan let the stove flame lick a little higher, then cupped it with a skillet so the light wouldn't silhouette him. Rex did what he always did when the world held its breath. He became stone with a heartbeat, head low, lips just parted over white teeth. The puppy twitched inside Ethan's unzipped parka, a fragile warmth against the old chill in his ribs. He pressed it closer and felt the tiny chest stutter on a rhythm that made him angrier than fear ever could. A fist rapped the door. Too quick, one slow. Not a code he knew. The second set of steps dragged to the window. Frost fogged, then cleared under a palm. A face smeared there for half a heartbeat, stubble, scarf, eyes too bright. The man leaned in to see more. He didn't see. Rex move because by the time people see Rex, they've already made their mistake. Back, Ethan breathed, and the dog flowed a pace left, out of the window's cone. Cabin looks dead, a voice said through the wind. Check, and we're back to the trucks. Ladies first, another voice answered, dry as split wood. Ethan didn't want a fight. Fights wasted heat and time, and the kind of luck you only get once. He reached to the latch and eased it a thumb's width. Cabin's occupied, he said, voice calm enough to sit on. Keep walking and you'll keep breathing. A pause. When men are hungry and cold, they try to decide if pride is worth frostbite. You alone? The first asked. I'm enough. Share the stove, soldier, the second said, the word soldier landing with the sneer of someone who'd been one and didn't want to be anymore. Storm's getting teeth. Rex angled toward the crack, a low hum in his chest. Ethan let the silence stretch until the wind spoke for him, snow hissing across the sill. You lift that latch, he said, and the dog gets there before you do. Boots scuffed. A curse got eaten by the weather. Then the first voice, closer, a little too reasonable. We don't want trouble. Then don't make any. Their footfalls retreated, not fully circling toward the back. Ethan slid the bolt and moved, mapping boards he'd tested with his weight. Rex ghosted the back wall, nose writing a sentence in the cold air. The puppy squirmed. Not fear, insistence. It nosed down the front of his jacket until its tiny head popped out and sniffed toward the far corner, a soft, breathy whine. Ethan blinked. Rex lifted his head, ears narrowing toward the same spot. A wall of stove-warmed planks, a crate, a toppled chair. The men outside crunched past the rear eave. One tried the back window. It protested, but held. Ethan set the puppy in his hat by the stove and crossed the room, rifle tucked to shoulder, eyes never leaving the door. He towed the crate aside. Something had scored the wood, recent, shallow arcs. The puppy wobbled after and pressed a paw to the baseboard, nails clicking. Rex's hum deepened. Ethan crouched and laid a gloved palm on the floor. It sang back a different note, hollow. He slid a knife between board and joist and levered. The plank gave with a sigh that could have been relief. Cold washed up from the dark. Rex, he whispered. The shepherd eased forward and inhaled. His entire posture changed, the stiff alertness softening into something else, recognition or mercy. He whined low, a sound Ethan had only ever heard at bedsides and graves. Hey, Ethan said to the dark, voice gentler than he remembered owning. If you're a raccoon, you've picked a good time to learn English. Silence. Then the tiniest shift of weight, a catch of breath that wasn't his, and a whisper, so thin he felt it more than heard it. Please. Every nerve in him went hot, then cold. He placed the knife aside and slid both hands under the next plank, prying until the nails squealed and the board upended. He lowered his head to the gap. 2 eyes stared back, wide, cracked at the corners from cold and crying. A child's face, ash-smudged, a knit cap pulled to the eyebrows, lips split. She couldn't be more than 7. One arm was hooked around something below, something he couldn't see. Her other hand clutched a ribbon tied to her wrist, frayed and filthy. Rex lay down, inches from the opening, head flat to make himself smaller. He whuffed once, air only, then licked the girl's knuckles where they clung to the edge. The change in her was visible, a slackening, a relief that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with a dog's wordless oath. "Easy," Ethan said. "We've got you." He reached. She flinched, then forced herself not to, courage like a tiny, brittle thing. "Is he gone?" she whispered. "Who?" "The man with the red scarf." Outside, snow slurred a shape against the far wall. "Back window," the second voice said, breath fogging the glass. "Put your shoulder in it." Ethan's jaw set. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. "Ava," she said, almost not saying it at all. "My brother is—" "He won't wake." The word brother hit him harder than any knock on the door. Ethan slid his arms into the hole, ignoring splinters and old nails. He found a small shoulder and a smaller chest. The body was hot with fever under clothes that had forgotten their job. Another figure stirred, Ava, trying to keep hold of them both. "I have you," he said, and meant all 3 words. He lifted. The boy came first, 4, maybe 5, head lolling, breath too fast. Ethan laid him by the stove and swept the parka back around the puppy with his forearm so the tiny creature could share the heat with another that needed it more. The puppy wriggled forward until its little body fit against the boy's ribs like 2 commas in the same sentence. Rex stayed at the opening, nose touching Ava's wrist, to guide, to measure. Ethan reached down, and this time Ava didn't flinch. He drew her up like the fragile thing she was, weighing less than the pack he carried and infinitely heavier. Her boots skidded on the floor. She blinked into light and didn't seem to believe it was for her. The back window surrendered with a crack. A shoulder, then a boot, then a scarf, faded red, wedging through. Rex exploded, a dark streak and a hard sound. His paws hit the sill, his teeth flashed. The intruder yelped and jerked away, leaving blood on the glass and pride on the snow. "Soldier's got a dog," the first voice shouted, suddenly farther. "Not worth it." "You said the stove," Red Scarf snarled, frustration overtaking calculation. "Find another door," the first snapped. "Storm'll kill him anyway." Their steps reeled away, not retreating so much as moving the problem forward. Ethan waited until the crunch faded to wind. He let Rex finish the growl he was owed, then touched the dog's flank. "With me." He closed the floor again, not to hide a secret, but to block the worst of the draft. He tucked blankets around the boy and fed the stove in stingy handfuls. Warmth now couldn't cost warmth later. He checked the boy's pupils, responsive, thank God, and pressed the inside of his wrist for a pulse that fluttered like a moth. He poured a capful of snowmelt into the boy's mouth. Some stayed. Ava knelt beside the parka hat, watching the puppy nosing at her brother's sleeve. "He found us," she whispered, voice breaking. Ethan looked up. "The puppy?" She nodded. "He followed me after the truck left. I put him under my coat so he wouldn't cry. He cried anyway. We hid when the men came. Then it got so cold I thought we'd close our eyes and fall. And he wriggled away." She touched the ribbon at her wrist as if to make sure it was still there. "I tried to hush him, but he kept scratching at the wood. He wanted someone to hear." Rex bumped her shoulder with his muzzle, a small, deliberate comfort. Ava put her hand on his head and seemed startled that touch could give back. Outside, the storm doubled down, as if winter had heard a story it didn't like. Ethan moved through the cabin's corners, finding what could be made into more than it was: chair legs, a curtain rod, a drawer of nails he could bend into hooks. He wired the door with 2 cans and a spoon so it would sing if someone tried the latch. He showed Ava where the stove's shadow was deepest, where the heat would reach without light giving them away. "What about Mama?" she asked, sudden, urgent. She said run when the men came. She said go to the bell, but the bell stopped. Her eyes searched his as if he might have heard the answer in the wind. "Will she know where we are?" Ethan felt the old pain move in him like weather. He would not make a promise he couldn't keep. He set a gentler one instead. "We'll make sure you can hear her if she calls." He tore the hem off a blanket and wrapped the puppy tighter to the boy. The tiny animal sighed and went limp, spent but not gone. The boy's breath slowed by a fraction. Sometimes the world fixes itself by degrees too small to see unless you stare hard. Ava touched the ribbon again. "She tied me so I wouldn't lose me," she said, the logic impeccable and unbearable. "Do you have a ribbon?" Ethan looked at the shoelace knotted around his left wrist, a thing he hadn't taken off in 3 winters because rituals are scaffolds. "Something like it," he said. Rex's head snapped toward the door a heartbeat before the cans kissed the spoon. The sound was tiny and enormous at once. "Back!" Ethan said, putting himself between the hearth and the hinge. The latch nudged and held, then nudged again. A voice, not the earlier 2, older, oiled with command. "Open! No one needs to freeze tonight." Ava's fingers found the shepherd's ruff and braided in. The boy stirred and made a soft sound like the end of a dream. The puppy sneezed and resettled, determined to keep being small and alive. Ethan breathed in once, slow, leaned his weight to the jam, and let the silence harden to a choice. On the other side of the wood, the voice tried on kindness like a coat. "Come now," it coaxed. "I have plenty. Children shouldn't suffer." Rex's lip lifted. Ava leaned close and said the first words that weren't shaped by fear alone, words that carried a tiny steel at the center. "Don't open, please." The wind bent the cabin. Somewhere beyond the white, a bell that hadn't rung in months rang in Ethan's memory, and another, smaller sound replaced it, the soft, stubborn scratch of a puppy's paw, telling the world, "I will be heard." Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle and met Rex's eyes. The dog didn't blink. "Stay behind me," Ethan said to Ava. Her answer was a whisper that fit the room like a prayer. "I trust you." The latch clicked a 3rd time. The spoon trembled against the cans, and the storm pushed its face against the door. The latch trembled again, harder this time, and the spoon clinked against the cans with a tiny, fragile cry. Ethan's finger hovered near the trigger, his whole body attuned to the space between breaths. Rex pressed close to the doorframe, every line of his body taut with readiness, ears pricked, eyes burning with golden light in the dim cabin. Ava clung to his sleeve. "Don't open it," she whispered again, so softly he barely caught the words over the storm. Ethan gave the slightest nod. "Not a chance." The voice outside chuckled, low and deliberate, as though it wanted to seep under the threshold. "You're stubborn, soldier. I respect that. But you can't win against the cold. No one can. Open the door, share your fire, and maybe the little ones will live." Ethan's jaw clenched. That tone, it wasn't hunger speaking. It was control. It was the same poison he had seen in warlords who offered bread only to trade it for souls. He glanced at the children. The boys' breaths were shallow, but they were breaths. The puppy shifted closer to him, nudging with its tiny nose as if determined to lend life from its own fragile spark. Ava kept her brother's hand wrapped in hers, ribbon trailing between their fingers like a lifeline. "Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Ethan whispered back. "We're not opening." His eyes met Rex's, and the dog gave the smallest sound of assent, a low chuff that said, "I'm with you." A fist slammed against the wood, rattling the hinges. Snow dusted down from the rafters. Ava flinched, but stayed crouched, her face half hidden behind the shepherd's thick ruff. Ethan stepped forward, pressing his shoulder to the door. "You've got one chance to leave," he said, his voice steel. "After that, I don't miss." Silence. Then boots crunched in retreat. One set, then two, then three. Not gone, just repositioning. He knew the rhythm of soldiers regrouping, even if they were scavengers now. Noah Ramirez had once told him that evil men rarely vanished when challenged. They circled back, patient as wolves. Rex padded to the window slit, ears twitching. His breath fogged the glass as he growled deep. Ethan leaned to look. Through the curtain of snow, three dark shapes moved toward the trees, silhouettes against white. One of them turned, and in that brief glance, Ethan caught it, a red scarf snapping in the wind. The same scarf Ava had whispered about. Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. He turned back to her. "They won't stop." Ava nodded, her face pale but set with quiet courage. She squeezed her brother's hand and whispered, "I won't let them take him." The fire crackled faintly. The boy stirred, coughed, then breathed in a little deeper as the puppy pressed closer against his chest. It was as if the tiny creature was refusing to let him slip away. Ethan crouched beside them, lowering his voice. "Listen, we'll move at dawn. The storm will mask us for a while. There's a village, maybe a day's march west. If the bell tower still stands, it's safe." Ava's eyes lit for the first time with something other than fear. "Mama," said the bell. "Then we'll find it," Ethan said. The storm roared outside, masking whatever the men were plotting in the trees. Rex paced in a slow circle, muscles coiled, eyes never leaving the door. Ethan settled against the wall, rifle across his knees, the children wrapped in blankets and guarded by the loyal shepherd. Sleep would not come easily, but for the first time in too long, Ethan felt something stronger than despair, something born of the stubborn will to protect. In the silence between the wind and the crackling fire, Ava whispered again, not a plea this time, but a promise to herself. "I'll keep him safe." Ethan heard her words and let them anchor him. Because in this frozen hell, it wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about salvation, small, fragile, and worth everything. The storm softened just before dawn, not by much. The wind still clawed, the snow still spun. But it relented enough that the world beyond the cabin's broken windows could be seen in smudged grey shapes instead of pure blindness. Ethan Cole rose slowly, his joints stiff, rifle slung over his shoulder. He'd barely closed his eyes all night. Rex had stayed awake with him, the German shepherd pacing and pausing, ears twitching to every sound outside. The dog was a shadow that never wavered, his presence a tether, keeping Ethan from slipping too far into exhaustion. Ava stirred first. She lay with her arm draped over her younger brother, her thin body bent as a shield around him. The boy's fever had broken just a little in the night. His cheeks were flushed instead of grey, his breath deeper, steadier. The puppy had not left his side once, curling against him as though its tiny body was both guardian and fire. Ethan crouched and touched Ava's shoulder gently. She blinked awake, her big sad eyes lifting to him, waiting for judgment. "Is it morning?" she whispered. "As close as we'll get," Ethan said. Rex padded forward and nudged her hand, tail sweeping once across the floor. Ava's lips trembled, then softened into the smallest smile. She buried her face briefly in the shepherd's fur, drawing courage. Ethan began tearing fabric into strips and binding them around the children's hands and feet for extra warmth. "We move west. There's a bell tower. If it's still standing, we'll be safe." Ava's gaze sharpened. "Mama told me that. She said run to the bell." Ethan nodded once, so she made it that far. Maybe she's still alive. He didn't say it aloud. Promises like that could turn into knives when the truth broke them. The cabin door groaned as Ethan pushed it open. Cold slammed into them, biting, merciless. The storm had laid a white shroud over everything, erasing tracks from the night before. For a moment, the world looked untouched, peaceful, until Rex froze at the threshold, nose high, hackles rising. Ethan followed his gaze. The tree line. Just at the edge of vision, a scarf of red flickered in the wind before vanishing behind the pines. "They're still out there," Ethan muttered. Ava clutched her brother's hand, tighter. The boy stirred but didn't wake, his weight heavy in her arms when Ethan lifted him instead. He settled the child against his chest, wrapped in the soldier's coat, while Ava walked beside him. Rex trotted ahead, ears rotating, body taut with purpose. They trudged west. The snow clung to their legs, slowed every step, burned lungs with its dry cold. Ethan's boots sank deep, leaving marks that the storm tried to fill in as fast as it could. Ava followed his footprints carefully, tiny legs straining but refusing to complain. The boy stirred once in Ethan's arms, lips cracking as he whispered something. Ethan bent close. "Papa," the boy breathed, and then sank back into half-sleep. The word struck Ethan like shrapnel, sharp, lodged deep. He had heard it on other battlefields from children who had lost too much. He had no right to answer to it. But his chest tightened all the same, and his arms held the boy a little closer. Hours blurred, snow-blinded, wind-cut, but they pressed on. Ethan measured time by Ava's steps, how many she could manage before she slowed, how often her little fists clenched at her ribbon of courage. At one point Rex barked once, sharp, warning. Ethan dropped to a knee, pulling Ava against him. Shapes moved ahead, 3 of them stumbling through the storm. Not militia, villagers, ragged and desperate, hauling a sled. Their eyes lit with suspicion when they spotted Ethan, then softened when they saw Ava and the boy. One man pointed. "The bell tower?" Ethan nodded. "That way?" "West Ridge," the man croaked. "But militia have taken the road. You'll need the ravine." The villagers moved on, swallowed by the storm. Ethan adjusted the boy in his arms and turned toward the ravine. The ravine cut through the snow like a scar, its walls steep and jagged. They descended carefully, Rex leaping down first, Ava clutching Ethan's coat as she scrambled behind. The snow here was deeper, quieter, muffling the world. For a while, it felt safe. Then Rex froze again, head snapping to the ridge above. Ethan looked up, and his stomach dropped. Figures, dark against the pale sky. 5 of them, rifles slung, moving with purpose. And at the front, the red scarf, snapping in the wind like a banner of menace. They had been tracked. Ava gasped, clutching Ethan's arm. "It's him!" Ethan scanned quickly. They were cornered. The ravine would shield them from bullets for now, but once the men descended, it would be a trap. Rex growled low, ears forward. Ethan shifted the boy in his arms and handed him gently to Ava. "Stay behind me. Keep him close. Don't move until I say." Her eyes went wide. "What if... You trust me, right?" She nodded. Her lips trembled, but she nodded again. Ethan rose, rifle steady, Rex at his side. Snow swirled between them and the figures on the ridge. The red scarf lifted his hand, and the men began to descend. The world tightened to one line, one heartbeat. Ethan's breath smoked, Rex's growl deepened. Ava whispered a prayer. And then the first shot cracked across the ravine. The first shot shattered stone just inches from Ethan's head. Chips of rock burst into the air, stinging his face. He ducked, swung the rifle up, and sighted through the blur of snow. Rex was already in position, low and forward, muscles tight, waiting for the word. Ava gasped, pulling her brother tight against her chest, crouching in the snow with the puppy bundled under her coat. Her small body shook, not from the cold, but from the sound of war coming back to life. "Stay down!" Ethan barked, his voice hard enough to cut through fear. Another shot cracked. This one whined off the frozen wall behind them. The militia were firing low to trap rather than kill. Red Scarf wanted them alive. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. He fired once, sharp, controlled. A figure staggered, then toppled down the ridge, swallowed by snow. Silence for a breath, then the storm carried shouts. "They've got cover," one man yelled. "Flush them out," Red Scarf's voice boomed, thick with authority. Rex growled, pressing against Ethan's leg. His body vibrated with the urge to move. Ethan touched his flank. "Not yet, boy, not yet." The ravine gave them some protection, but it was a trap waiting to close. Ethan scanned quickly. The walls climbed steep, sheer in places, but farther ahead, the rock opened, sloped, leading toward the west ridge. If they could reach it, they could circle toward the bell tower. He leaned toward Ava. "When I say run, you follow, Rex. Do not stop. Do not look back. Understand?" Her big eyes filled, but she nodded fiercely. "Yes. Good girl." The boy whimpered in her arms. She hushed him, rocking gently, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. The puppy poked its head out of her coat, gave a tiny bark, then nestled back against the boy's chest. Ethan's heart twisted. Even the smallest creature refuses to quit. Then neither will I. The militia began descending, boots crunching, ropes scraping against stone. Ethan counted at least 4 left, plus Red Scarf. Too many to hold in open ground. He fired again, keeping them cautious, keeping their heads low. "Rex!" he hissed. The shepherd shot forward, a streak of dark fur against white snow. He bounded up the slope, barking ferociously, weaving in and out of sight. The militia swore, firing wildly, their shots chasing the dog instead of the soldier and children. "Now!" Ethan roared. He grabbed Ava's arm, pulling her to her feet. She clutched her brother, stumbling but running, following Rex's barking. Snow sprayed under their boots. The ravine's end loomed ahead, an escape if they could reach it. Bullets snapped at their heels. One tore through Ethan's sleeve, burning his arm, but he kept moving. Ava tripped, fell to her knees. Ethan hauled her up with one arm, never slowing. "Keep going!" he shouted. Rex reappeared, barreling into a soldier halfway down the slope. The man screamed, rifle clattering as dog and prey rolled into the snow. Rex's teeth flashed, his growl savage, primal. The soldier's cries cut short, but Red Scarf didn't falter. He raised his rifle and fired, not at Ethan, not at Rex, but at the ground. The bullet struck near Ava's feet, snow exploding. She shrieked, stumbled back, nearly falling. Ethan swung around, rifle raised, their eyes locked across the distance. Red Scarf grinned, scarf whipping in the storm. He shouted something Ethan couldn't hear, then lifted a hand, ordering his men to circle, to trap. "We're almost there," Ethan urged. He fired twice more, forcing the militia down. "Move!" At last, they reached the slope's end. It wasn't much, just a narrow climb leading out of the ravine. But it was hope. Ethan pushed Ava up first, steadying her with one hand while his other kept the rifle aimed. She scrambled, boots slipping, but she made it to the ledge. She turned, panting, and reached down. "Give him to me," she pleaded, stretching for her brother. Ethan lifted the boy carefully, passing him up into her arms. She cradled him tight, eyes wild with desperation. "Now you," Ethan said. She shook her head. "Not without you. I'm right behind. Go." Rex bounded up beside her, shaking snow from his fur, his muzzle stained but his eyes blazing with loyalty. Ethan fired again, covering their escape, then started climbing. Snow crumbled under his boots, hands gripping icy stone. Halfway up, a bullet struck inches from his arm, sending shards into his cheek. He gritted his teeth, pulled higher. Red Scarf's voice roared below. "They won't leave this ravine alive." But Ethan climbed. Ava pulled her brother closer. Rex snarled above, and the puppy whimpered softly, all of them a fragile chain refusing to break. At the top, Ava's hand shot down, grasping his wrist with all the strength of a child refusing to lose again. Ethan pulled himself over, landing in the snow beside them. For a moment, breathless, they were safe. Then another gunshot cracked, and snow just inches from the boy's head burst upward. Ava screamed. The militia were climbing fast. Red Scarf's eyes locked onto them, cold and hungry. Ethan rolled onto his knees, rifle raised, heart pounding. The fight wasn't over, it had only just begun. The ridge gave them no comfort. It was exposed, a barren spine of rock and snow stretching west. The wind screamed across it like a predator, tearing at clothes, carrying sound farther than they wanted. Behind them, the militia still clawed their way out of the ravine, Red Scarf driving them forward with shouts and curses. Ethan Cole scanned the horizon. Westward, past the ridge, faint through the storm, a shape jutted into the sky. A broken steeple, the bell tower. It was still standing. "There," Ethan said, pointing. His voice was hoarse, but it carried the force of command. "That's where we go." Ava clutched her brother, the puppy pressed between them, her hair plastered with snow. She followed Ethan's gaze, her eyes widening. "The bell," she whispered, as if naming it gave her strength. Rex stood tall beside them, ears sharp, his chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. He turned his head toward the distant tower, then back toward the ravine, where gunshots cracked faintly. His growl rolled low, a warning. "They're coming." Ethan adjusted his rifle and knelt by Ava. "Listen to me. You keep moving no matter what happens. Rex will stay with you. Understand?" She shook her head fiercely. "Not without you." "You won't be without me," Ethan said, gripping her shoulder. "I'll be right behind." Her eyes brimmed, but she nodded. They pushed west. Snow pulled at their legs, every step a war. Ava staggered under the boy's weight until Ethan scooped him up again, cradling him against his chest. The boy's breath was shallow but present, his small hand still curled around the puppy. That fragile spark of life kept Ethan's feet moving when his muscles screamed for rest. Rex scouted ahead, weaving in and out of the storm, his dark fur the only sure landmark in the whiteout. Every few paces he glanced back, making sure they followed. Behind, the militia gained ground. The Red Scarf stood out like a slash of blood against snow. Shots rang out, one striking close enough that Ava stumbled as snow sprayed her legs. Ethan fired back without breaking stride, his bullets forcing the men to duck, buying seconds but not distance. They couldn't outrun forever. The ridge narrowed, a knife edge above a steep drop. Ava whimpered as she looked down. The slope fell away into darkness, jagged rocks jutting like broken teeth. Ethan guided her forward, steadying each of her steps, his arm a shield around her shoulders. A gunshot rang sharp, and Ethan felt heat along his arm as a bullet grazed his sleeve. He dropped low, returning fire. One man pitched backward, arms flailing as he tumbled down the cliff. The others pressed harder. Rex barked savagely, bounding forward, disappearing into the storm. Moments later, a scream echoed from the militia line, wet, cut short. Rex reappeared, muzzle stained, eyes glowing like fire in the snow. Ava gasped, pressing closer to Ethan. "He saved us." Ethan nodded grimly. "He'll keep saving us if we let him." At last the ridge widened, opening to a flat stretch leading toward the bell tower. Its shape loomed clearer now, though the roof was half collapsed, and its great bell hung cracked and silent. Still it was shelter, and maybe salvation. But Red Scarf was relentless. His voice rose above the storm, commanding his men. "Don't let them reach the tower. Take the children alive." Ethan's blood ran cold at the words. He fired again, each shot deliberate. One man fell, another ducked. But they were too many. Ava stumbled, her knees buckling. Ethan grabbed her, pulling her forward. She sobbed once, then clenched her teeth, refusing to quit. The ribbon on her wrist snapped loose, fluttering in the wind, but she didn't notice. The boy stirred in Ethan's arms, his fever-bright eyes opening a sliver. His lips moved. Ethan bent low, catching a single broken word. "Mama." It cut through him, sharper than bullets. Rex barked furiously from ahead. He had reached the base of the tower. He stood at the doors, teeth bared, barking in rapid bursts that echoed off the stone. It was both warning and summons. "We're almost there," Ethan urged. They broke into a run. Snow blinded, lungs burned, but the tower grew closer with each desperate step. Ethan could almost feel the stone under his hands, the shelter it promised. Then a shot cracked louder than the rest. Ava screamed. The puppy yelped. Ethan spun, dropping to one knee, his rifle aimed. Red Scarf stood barely 30 yards away, rifle raised, scarf whipping in the gale. His eyes were fixed not on Ethan but on Ava, their gazes locked. Ethan felt the weight of choice heavy in his bones. He could fire now, maybe kill the man, but the militia would still come. Or he could keep running, shield the children, trust Rex to buy them seconds. Rex snarled, hackles high, waiting for Ethan's command. "Ava," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm. "Run! Now!" She clutched her brother, tears freezing on her cheeks, but she obeyed. She ran, small boots pounding across the snow toward the tower. Red Scarf fired. The bullet struck the ground inches from her feet, snow exploding. She stumbled but kept moving, Rex bolting to her side. Ethan rose, rifle steady. His finger tightened on the trigger. And in that instant, he knew the fight would end at the tower. The tower rose above them like a giant frozen in stone. Its base was half buried in snow, the door weathered, cracked, but still holding. Ethan shoved Ava and her brother through the narrow gap, Rex lunging in after them, his chest heaving, muzzle wet with blood and ice. Inside, the air was bitter, but still. The stones held back some of the wind, and for a moment the silence felt like relief. Ava collapsed to her knees, clutching her brother, the puppy pressed between them, both children shaking. Ethan barred the door with a fallen beam, just as bullets thudded against the wood. The entire frame shuddered, flakes of snow raining down from the ceiling. "They're here," Ava whispered, voice trembling. Ethan crouched, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You don't move. You stay behind that altar stone. No matter what you hear, you stay put." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "I promise." Rex pressed against her side for a moment, licking her hand once. Then he turned back toward the door, ears flat, growl rolling deep in his chest. The boy stirred faintly, eyes opening just a crack. He murmured, "Mama, the bell," before sinking back into fevered dreams. Ava kissed his forehead, whispering fiercely, "We'll find her. We will." Ethan looked toward the shadowed stairwell that spiraled upward into darkness. If they could get higher, they could defend longer. But the militia were already pounding at the door. They didn't have time. Outside, Red Scarf's voice cut through the storm. "Break it down! Don't damage the children! Kill the soldier and the dog!" The words sank like iron into Ethan's chest. He had heard orders like that before, orders that turned men into monsters. He wouldn't let it happen again. Wood splintered. The beam cracked. The door bowed inward. Rex braced himself, lips curling back, teeth gleaming in the dim firelight of the small stove Ethan had coaxed back to life. The first man forced his way in. Rex launched with a roar, slamming him to the floor. The man screamed as teeth tore into his arm. Ethan fired once, the gunshot deafening in the stone chamber. The man went still. Another pushed through. Ethan swung his rifle butt hard, cracking the stock against the intruder's skull. He dropped in silence. Ava clutched her brother tighter, shielding his body with her own, whispering prayers she didn't even know she remembered. The puppy whimpered, pressed close to both children, its tiny body shaking but refusing to leave them. The door buckled again. 2 more surged in. Ethan fired, but his rifle clicked empty after the second shot. He swung the weapon as a club, grunting with the effort. Rex tore at another man's leg, dragging him down into the snow-choked threshold. Still, more came. Ethan fell back, pushing Ava toward the stairwell. "Go, now!" "But go!" She obeyed, scrambling up the narrow stairs with her brother held close, the puppy tucked against them both. Rex darted after, but Ethan barked a command. "Guard them!" Rex stopped, torn, then obeyed, his loyalty absolute. He bounded up the steps, positioning himself between the children and the chaos below. Ethan grabbed a broken chair leg, holding it like a spear. He braced as 2 more militia lunged in. One swung a knife, slashing Ethan's sleeve, drawing a line of blood across his arm. Ethan rammed the wood into his chest, driving him back against the wall. The second raised his rifle, but Ethan slammed his elbow into the man's jaw, snapping his head back. The fight was raw, close, brutal. Every strike echoed off the stones, every gasp swallowed by the storm outside. Ethan's muscles screamed, but he held, because behind him were children who had no one else. At last, a silence fell. Bodies sprawled at the doorway, their blood steaming faintly in the cold. Ethan's chest heaved. His arm throbbed where the knife had cut him. He turned toward the stairs, only to freeze. Red Scarf stood at the base, rifle aimed up into the shadows where Ava crouched. "Move aside, soldier," he said, voice calm, almost conversational. "I only want the girl." Rex growled above, body taut, ready to leap. Ava clutched her brother, tears streaming down her face, but she refused to move. "She's mine," Red Scarf said. "The mother traded her, promised her. That bell was supposed to mark the deal. You've stolen what belongs to me." Ethan's stomach twisted. The bell, the same one Ava's mother had spoken of, twisted into a trap by this man's cruelty. "Belongs!" Ethan spat, fury in his voice. "She's not yours. She's not anyone's." Red Scarf sneered. "Everything is someone's. Out here, only power decides. Step aside, soldier, or I put her down now." His rifle lifted toward Ava. For one heartbeat, everything slowed. Ethan's blood roared in his ears. Rex tensed. Ava whispered something soft, her voice breaking. "Please?" Ethan raised his weapon, empty though it was, and locked eyes with Red Scarf. "You'll have to go through me." The wind howled through the broken tower windows, and the bell above gave the faintest groan, as though it still remembered its voice. The standoff was set. Snow poured through the shattered windows, sweeping across the stone floor in silver streams. The broken bell groaned above, its old chains trembling as if the tower itself held its breath. Red Scarf stood at the stairwell, rifle steady, scarf snapping in the wind like a banner of blood. His eyes gleamed with certainty. "Last chance, soldier. Step aside. The girl's mine. The deal was made." Ethan Cole tightened his grip on the empty rifle, feeling the weight of everything. Ava's sobs, the fevered boy's shallow breath, Rex's growl vibrating through the stones. "You'll touch her over my dead body." Red Scarf smiled thinly. "That can be arranged." His finger slid toward the trigger. Rex launched. The shepherd exploded from the shadows of the stairwell, a blur of muscle and fury. Red Scarf fired, too late. The bullet cracked harmlessly into stone as Rex slammed into him, teeth sinking into his arm. The rifle clattered across the floor. Red Scarf roared, slamming the butt of a knife against the dog's head, trying to break free. Ethan surged forward, swinging the empty rifle like a club. The wood splintered against Red Scarf's ribs, driving him back toward the door. He snarled, twisting free of Rex, and lunged at Ethan with the knife. Steel flashed. Ethan caught the blade with his arm, pain lancing hot, but he drove forward, tackling the man into the snow-drifted threshold. They crashed to the ground, grappling, fists pounding, breaths ragged. "Why fight for them?" Red Scarf spat, blood on his lips. "They'll die anyway. You'll die!" Ethan shoved him back, rage burning, "because they're worth more than men like you ever were." Red Scarf slashed again. Ethan caught his wrist, forcing it aside, muscles straining. For a moment, the knife hovered between them, trembling, the storm screaming through the cracks. Then Ava's voice cut through the chaos, high, trembling, but filled with fire. "Leave him alone!" Red Scarf's head snapped up. She stood halfway down the stairs, her thin arms wrapped tight around her brother, the puppy clutched against them both. Her eyes blazed with a defiance far too big for her small frame. That flicker of distraction was enough. Rex lunged again, jaws closing on Red Scarf's shoulder, dragging him sideways. Ethan tore the knife free and slammed it into the wood beside the man's head, pinning his sleeve to the wall. Red Scarf howled, thrashing, but Ethan pressed his weight down, every muscle burning with the fight. "It ends here." The bell above gave a long, shuddering groan. The storm slammed into the tower, shaking the walls, and the old chain finally snapped. With a deafening crash, the cracked bell fell, shattering stone as it struck. The sound thundered through the valley, echoing across the snow for miles. Red Scarf froze under Ethan's grip, eyes wide, not with fear of death, but with disbelief that the bell he had twisted into a weapon of control had chosen this moment to sound its last defiance. Ethan met his gaze, voice low, steady. "That was your deal-breaking." Rex tore free, snapping at his throat. The scream ended before it began. Red Scarf collapsed into silence, scarf half buried in the snow. The storm howled, the tower shook, but inside, for the first time in days, there was no more threat. Ethan slumped back, chest heaving. His arm bled, his body shook, but his eyes found Ava. She was still clutching her brother, tears frozen on her cheeks. The puppy squirmed, whining, licking the boy's hand as if to rouse him. Ethan staggered to them, crouched low, and wrapped them both in his arms. Ava buried her face in his chest, her voice breaking with relief. "You didn't leave us. You didn't." He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering, "Never." Rex came to his side, pressing his great head against Ethan's shoulder, his golden eyes soft, protective. Hours later, dawn broke. The storm had thinned, leaving the valley cloaked in white silence. Smoke no longer curled from the militia's campfires. The bell's final toll had carried far, too far for the men to risk lingering. They were gone. Ethan led them from the tower, his arm bound, his rifle slung once more. Ava walked beside him, her brother held close, the puppy tucked safely between them. Rex scouted ahead, every step a sentinel's vow. At the ridge, the first rays of sun touched the horizon. The snow glittered, not cruel now, but clean. Ava stopped, pointing west. "The village," she whispered. In the distance, faint but real, smoke rose from chimneys. The bell's cry had reached someone. Help was waiting. Ethan exhaled, a sound halfway between exhaustion and prayer. He looked down at Ava, at the boy, at the puppy, nestled safe, and then at Rex, standing proud in the snow. Healing would not erase the scars. But here, in this frozen land, they had found each other, and that was enough to build a future.